welcome to episode number 16 of the AfterHours Podcast. In today's episode, Frankie and Joey talk to H. Joseph Ehrmann about his experience with Elixir. So sit back, get comfortable, and grab a cold beer with the boys for another AfterHours interview.
Welcome back to the AfterHours Podcast. I'm your host, Francisco Delator. Co-host today, Joey Prohaska. We're joined today with H. Joseph Ehrmann from Elixir out in San Francisco. How you doing, man?
Great, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, no problem. This is the first one we've done out in Cali, so I believe things are a bit different. We're in Ohio. Everything's open. Do you want to give us a little rundown on the state of affairs in California right now?
Well, it's a little bit of a cluster. The governor says one thing, the mayor says another, the ABC says something different, the Department of Health says something different. Nobody's aligning. The governor has loosened things up for each of the counties to decide how they want to proceed. And San Francisco has taken a bit more of a conservative approach than some other cities, so we're still closed. Here in California, we have two kinds of full liquor licenses that are predominantly a Type 47 and a Type 48. A 47 is full liquor with food, and a 48 is full liquor without food. So Elixir is a 48. Meaning we don't have to sell food, we don't have a kitchen. So a lot of the controls that were put in place from the get-go delineated between whether or not you were serving food. So we could not serve cocktails. All we could sell, they made a pretty quick move right out of the gate to allow us to sell alcohol to go and by delivery like we were a liquor store. But they said if you don't have food or you don't sell it in conjunction with a meal, you can't sell anything except factory sealed bottles, which meant no flights, no cocktails, anything like that. That didn't come around until maybe a few weeks ago, where they said that the first change they made was that bars who had a kitchen but were not actually a restaurant could sell food, sell cocktails if they were selling it with food. And then they said later, a couple weeks later, or maybe longer, bars that don't have a kitchen can partner with a food operation, restaurant, food truck, caterer, etc., to sell food. They had to bring it through their own register and then pay the food vendor out like a vendor. And then, then things started opening up everywhere. And so they've made the plan to open outside, and a timeline for that. The governor said we could do it, and then it took the mayor a while to come up with a plan. So that is targeted. There are bars and restaurants that are open and seating outside, rolling out into the sidewalks and some streets. The DPW, the Public Works, who controls the sidewalks, still haven't put out any ruling on permits for putting chairs on the sidewalks, which is normally very controlled. Same thing with going out into the street, into parking spots, which is SFMTA, or the transit, and they have a different process, and they haven't put anything out. And so the mayor just came out and said, go ahead and do it. We're not going to ticket anybody. We're not, we just want people to get open. So there are bars and restaurants that are opening into the streets and serving outside slowly. I'm not doing that quite yet, although I'm building a plan to do it. They just had a vote yesterday with our board of supervisors to agree to the ruling that would allow San Francisco to do it legally. We were held up by that legally. And now the next hurdle for bars is whether or not we will be able to do that along with restaurants. For the time being, I'm sitting back. I'm not going to go spend a bunch of money on something that's not sustainable. Waiting to see what happens, because I do plan to survive this economically. I think a lot of people that are jumping, you don't want to run out of cash. You got to be smart to survive as a business in this. You don't want to throw a bunch of cash at an opportunity that's not going to produce enough revenue and be profitable, because that'll sink you. So I'm being cautious and moving forward with our delivery business, our virtual events, our merchandise sales. Those are the things that are driving some revenue now. We did get all of our loans, the PPP and EIDL. So we have some cash to get through, but that a lot of that is debt. So trying not to spend it. We got it, but I'm sitting on it.
Right on. I'm glad to hear that, things are starting to open back up in San Francisco, and California is a little more laissez-faire now. They're letting businesses and counties decide, what the next step should be. You mentioned that it's more economically smart for you to wait to open up as opposed to jumping the gun. And that would seem counterintuitive at first glance, because you'd think, all right, opening up, early would then maximize my profits in the short run. Could you give like a breakdown on why it's more financially smart for you to wait to open up?
Something you don't hear anybody really talk about it much is a term called your burn rate. And this was a buzzword back in the dot-com days when these, dot-com companies that were raising millions of dollars and throwing big parties. And San Francisco was like the big heyday of 2000, late 90s. And it was all about, how much money do you raise and how quickly are you burning it and how long will you be able to sustain before you go out of business because you haven't actually made any revenue. And that was what sank a lot of dot-com companies. And it's important to know what your burn rate is. How much are you spending on a monthly basis, and do you need to spend all of it? So monitoring your outgoing cash, cutting where you can, eliminating services you don't need, ending leases you don't have to pay for that aren't doing anything for you. Stuff like that will cut your cash flow. And then you have to look at where's your revenue going to be and how much profit is involved in that revenue. And is it worth putting the money into paying people to work and buying to-go bottles and cups, and if you're not going to generate enough volume of business? Is it more sensible to sit on your cash and wait until things are really stable and people are actually out comfortably spending money and enjoying themselves? There's a lot of math.
No, I mean, it sounds like you have a pretty good grasp on it.
Yeah, well, I've also been in business for almost 17 years. I've done so by managing my cash. We had ups and downs. We had the crash in 2008, and Elixir, my version of Elixir was born out of the dot-com crash. I don't claim to be a business genius, but I've learned a few things along the way, and I'm not a finance genius by any measure either. So I have good advisors and I have a good team, and communicate with my team and try to keep them together and support them as much as we can and keep everybody positive and excited to get back when we can. And also, one of the big problems a lot of people are facing is getting labor back, with getting them off of unemployment. And I told everyone on my team, I said, you're gonna when you come off unemployment and come to work, there's going to be a pain point. You're going to make less than you made on unemployment, most likely. I don't know that there's going to be any point where that's going to be a smooth transition, unless, of course, your unemployment runs out and they stop giving you that extra $600 and all that. So we'll see. We have some good, dedicated people, professionals that want to come back to the trade and come back to Elixir. So
that's awesome, Age. So Frankie mentioned you own a few different restaurants or bars.
Not restaurants or bars, businesses.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So I was the one doing most of the deep dive and research on, you and, your businesses, and, in your biography, you have many businesses that started even, before Elixir. Do you want to shed some light on the other businesses you got going right now?
Yeah, well, it all started with Elixir, and that gave the popularity that I was able to achieve with Elixir gave rise to, and that was, in the early days of cocktail revival or renaissance or whatever you want to call it. I was making unique and high quality cocktails when not a lot of people were, and we got a lot of notoriety for that in the early 2000s, and that led to exposure to some spirits companies, which gave me the opportunity to travel, and I became I helped launch Square One Organic Spirits, became the brand ambassador. I flew around the country training bartenders in the mid 2000s on how to squeeze lines and make simple syrup when they were using roses and high fructose corn syrup in a bottle that they were buying. It was really that basic. That's easy. That was, I formed a consulting company called Cocktail Ambassadors in order to do that kind of work. And I eventually got invited to judge spirits competitions and flown around the world to study spirits at distilleries and participate in lots of events around the country. I started San Francisco Cocktail Week in 2007 with some friends, and we ran that for 7 years. I started doing cocktail catering early on with Elixir, and through starting San Francisco Cocktail Week, we actually opened a facility downtown where it was called the Cocktail Bill Boothby Center for the Beverage Arts, or the Boothby Center, as it was better known. I had that for 5 years and ran that as an event center that was focused on teaching the public about cocktails and spirits. And so we did a lot of educational work there. And that evolved into a business model of doing cocktail classes for team building events for corporations. And that's where we really were making the money to pay the rent down there. And so when I closed that, because the rent went crazy, we were just a block from the then new Twitter building. I took the whole thing and I wrapped it into a new company I called Elixir to Go, which was basically all of the things we do at Elixir, but outside of Elixir. So all the cocktail catering, the cocktail classes, consumer facing events. So all of my trade stuff became part of Cocktail Ambassadors, where I create and develop and execute beverage education programs for primarily brands or categories. For example, I'm one of 100 or so certified cognac educators in the world, working for the BNIC, teaching bartenders about cognac. I ran the Authentic Caribbean Rum program on the West Coast for the West Indies Rum and Spirits Producers Association, teaching people about rum. I developed the global education platform for Cherry Hearing for 3 years on leading up to their 200-year anniversary. So stuff like that. I worked on education. I still do that. And a friend of mine started a cocktail mixer company called Fresh Victor, and he invited me in on it. And I've been working with him on that for several years, and that's been taking off in the last couple of years. And we had been providing fresh cocktail mixers to the trade, growing fairly well in Q1 this year, opening up. We were doing great business at Disney Epcot Center, and I was opening up casino programs in Las Vegas and getting into national restaurant chains and hotel chains. It was all kind of just starting taking off when this got shut down. So we quickly pivoted and launched a consumer line. So now we're available direct to consumer at shop.freshvictor.com, and we're getting out into retailers throughout Northern California. And looking into trying to get into some programs. We're talking to a grocery chain in the Midwest, a retailer in New England, and we're trying to get that out there. So right now I kind of have 2 full-time jobs: growing Fresh Victor as a brand and a product, and doing product development and shooting videos and recipes and all of that, and then also trying to save my bar. I keep busy, and I have a 7-year-old in the family.
Yeah, it all sounds very impressive, and I am impressed by how you're able to spread yourself amongst all of these businesses and also still keep everything on track with Elixir. And basically, you have your hand in 2 buckets, and you're just being able to control both at the same time. Most people cannot multitask to that level. Is there any secrets that you have for your organization, or how you're able to manage so much at once?
It's the evolution of teams and systems over time. Like I said, we're coming up on the 17-year anniversary of Elixir in November. Shay Shaunson is my general manager. He's been with me for 12 or 13 years. Nick Desenfants as well has been with me that long, and Nick is running the Elixir to Go program. So both of those guys have come up with me for years, not only implementing systems that I created, but creating their own systems and implementing them. So I've got a really great management team and great bartenders as well. The key to any business that operates year round like a bar is to build great systems and then hire great people to run them. So Elixir generally, when it was just going on its own, was a very well-oiled machine that I didn't have to pay too much attention to. I paid a lot of attention to it because I love it. It's my baby, and but I also give my managers as much leeway to run things their way while holding on to a vision of what Elixir is. The consulting stuff was, I always said my consulting work is me getting paid for being me. So it's, it's either my opinions by judging competitions or speaking at an event or guest bartending or developing recipes for a brand, which are all my creativity, or applying my knowledge to a brand to help them build or do market entry work. I can take that and leave it as it comes. Like, if things are slow and I need work, I can go shake the trees and try to find some consulting work. And then the event business, that one's been a bit harder to build. And it was actually, we had a great year last year and it was building. Nick made a really great transition from co-managing the bar with Shay to running the event business and letting Shay run the bar. That was a great split of taking two people who knew everything and letting them take on new responsibilities that matched really well to their skill sets and knowledge base and what they liked doing. Nick really enjoyed doing the events and executing them, teaching classes and running bars at events. And Shay loved running the bar. So they were both happy with that split. And so now we're kind of coming back together as a team to see how we're going to move forward. Everybody's got new things to do, and I've got to be more involved on the recovery plan and how to execute it, and showing some leadership and creativity. It's also, my risk. I have to make the decisions on how risk averse or I'm going to be or not, how bold I'm going to be. Yeah, it all comes back to good systems and good people. And those take time to both build and foster, and you don't want to lose them. It's one of the biggest expenses in a business is losing your good people because they're very hard to replace.
Absolutely. And they say behind every great leader is an equally great team that supports them. And it sounds like you really buy into that thought process, as most great businesses do, because, you're only one person. You can't do everything. But it sounds like you can effectively delegate and hand off tasks to the people that do have that, like, the power to influence your businesses at a high level.
Yeah, and you scrape your knees along the way too.
Absolutely. There's a learning process that comes with everything. So
speaking of scraping your knees, is there anything you've done in the past that you can recommend for somebody maybe opening a bar that they shouldn't do?
Yeah, what you shouldn't do is ignore your people. I think one of my biggest lessons learned in the opening, in the first, few years of Elixir, was that I was so wrapped up in defining my processes, establishing my processes, paying the bills. When you open a bar, you're working your tail off with little sleep and probably a poor diet. Don't do that. It's hard, when you're younger, it's easier. 17 years ago, I was quite a bit younger. But no matter, you feel like you're invincible at a younger age. You really should take better care of yourself. Eat well, sleep. You'll think better. You'll execute better on a daily basis. Same goes true now, but it's a bit harder now that I have so many things to do. I didn't pay enough attention toward how I was hiring and who I was hiring. It was my hiring processes. I continually had these problems in the first few years that were people-based, and I finally realized that if I had just put a little more effort up front into how I was hiring and who I was hiring, I wouldn't have those problems. And then that gets to that expense of losing good people, because they are hard to find, and you need to put everything you can into keeping them engaged and interested and happy, because they're what it's all about. They're the ones interacting primarily with your customers, and they're the ones running your business, really. So you've got to have great people. You got to meet their needs and make sure that they're getting what they need, what they want, and that they're happy. And if they are, then you become so much more powerful, because they are buying into your vision, or they are preferably collectively building a vision that the customers notice and that motivates everybody.
You've been in the industry for a little while now, and you've been all around the world in the food and beverage industry. Let's take it back now. How did you get into the food and beverage industry originally, and where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey.
That's a little ways from where you're at now.
Yeah. Yeah, I started in the industry as a cook on the Jersey Shore when I was 16. My parents had just bought a beach house, on a little shed of a house. The first summer we went down there, I said, I was in high school, and I said, we're going to spend the summer here. I need to get a job, and I literally went to the restaurant, 5 houses down the street on the corner, and applied for a job, and I got hired as a busboy. But the day I showed up for work, the front of house manager who hired me wasn't there, and the chef in the kitchen said, "You want to learn how to cook?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure." I spent the summer cooking with him. His name was Duke LaCicero, and he went on, back then, this is 86, he went on to open his own restaurant. He and the general manager, the front of house manager that hired me, were roommates at CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, and they had just come to the Jersey Shore to open this restaurant for Mike, the general manager. His family had a long running restaurant on the island called the Dutchman's Brauhaus, and they opened this offshoot called Ot Seeketch, and they hired Duke as the chef, and Mike ran the front of house. And Duke had, prior to being a student at CIA, had worked for Paul Prudhomme and was from New Orleans. And I knew nothing of New Orleans at the time, but I got to cook with him and learn all about blackened everything and all kinds of New Orleans cuisine that Duke infused into Jersey Shore food, like bluefish and blue claw crabs and different seafood. What's that?
Jambalaya.
Oh yeah, all kind. We had different specials every week, and I learned a ton. It was amazing. He taught me all about intuition in cooking. I learned cooking from my grandmother. Really, she was a phenomenal cook, and I grew up cooking in the kitchen with her, and so I liked it. But he taught me so much about food and cooking, and then just from there, like a lot of people, I just stayed in restaurants all through high school and college. I cooked primarily until I got out of college, although I did wait some tables in college, and then I moved to Vail, Colorado out of school to become a ski bum, and first job I got was as a cook at a Mexican restaurant called the Jackalope, which was also a big live band bar with a rockin' bar and lots of margaritas, and before long I found myself behind the bar there. I worked there, and I was in Vail for 4 seasons, and I went to grad school in Arizona and got my MBA at Thunderbird, and I bartended all through my MBA program. Got out of there and moved to Madrid for a couple of years and got a job working in a PR firm, helping run a PR firm as their kind of token MBA, American MBA. Working bilingually, doing sales presentations and managing our international client base. And then came back to the States at the tail end of the .com boom. So I was living in Spain, not making enough money, while all my friends were back in the .com boom, making a ridiculous amount of money. And I was like, I got to get home. Came back, got into the tech industry in a not so great paying job, but better than Spain. And after a year of that, I got recruited to Silicon Valley into an international position, which is what I really wanted. A great role, which had me flying around the world. And that only lasted 9 months until it crashed and everybody lost their jobs. And I wound up bartending to pay my MBA debt. I helped open a small bar here in San Francisco called the Fishbowl, which is still there. And after 6 months of working there, I said, why might I go back to the tech industry? And when it's the bar industry I know and love. And now I can apply my MBA and all my experience and everything I've ever done and open my own place. So I quit that. I wrote a business plan, formed a company, raised the capital, found Elixir, which was a dilapidated dive bar, bought it, including the property, moved in, cleaned the whole thing up, restored it, every square inch by hand with a lot of help from my friends who would come in after work, late night, weekends, 52 straight days of restoration more than renovation. We opened on 11/21/2003. So November will be our 17-year anniversary.
That is a wild story. Is there any reason why you lost interest in the tech industry?
You know, the function that I was serving in the business was enjoyable to me. I was the director of international business development. I was working with partnerships, companies that used our software, building relationships on how we could work together with our mutual client base, and it had me traveling, and which was great, and I loved it. But the tech industry itself just didn't excite me. It was, quite frankly, it was a lot of the people. I didn't really enjoy a lot of the people. And when I went back to the bar business, like, there's nothing better than people in the hospitality industry. They're just, people in hospitality live to make people smile, and they're good at it because they smile a lot. And so you get a lot of just friendly, smart, creative, interactive, gregarious, socially adept people. In the tech world, I got a lot of odd, distancing, socially inept people.
Right.
That sounds about right.
Swayed in that's a lot of my client base right there. So I don't want to piss anyone off, but
yeah, tech's kind of resurging in San Fran in the past few years.
It's a whole different era. It's a whole different thing than the .com thing. The .com boom was wrought with marketing, which was ultimately its downfall. It was such a boondoggle around here because it was all marketing people, and it was all hype about how much money everyone was going to make and how great and how fun it all was. And it was a whole new era, and the world is different. And then we all lost our jobs, and the only ones that kept them were the engineers. And as the tech industry moved forward, the only ones that kept getting jobs were the engineers, and the marketing people didn't. The marketing force didn't come back. And then everything shifted to mobile, and so it's really mobile technology that changed the tech world and made the new tech world in San Francisco.
That's wild, because I know Plenty of Fish, like the big dating app that was thought of by, like, I believe 3 sisters that were from San Francisco, and I'm sure there's plenty of other mobile applications that are just as successful out of San Fran. Me and Joey and the rest of our team, we founded Winhouse Software, which is a software company in Toledo, Ohio. And that's one cool thing about being here in Toledo as opposed to, Silicon Valley or New York or something like that, is that we're one of the dominant players in our space, and we haven't been in business that long just because we have novelty skill sets that allow us to be one of the best in the area. I mean, obviously we all work 12 hours a day. We put in a lot of work into, how we come off to our customers and customer relations, and also just being true to one another and making sure that we all have each other's back and stuff like that.
Which I'm sure it'd be a lot harder in San Fran when there's 1,000 software companies instead of 10 or 15. Being so close to big companies like Apple, I guess not too close, but a few hours away. Have you seen anybody, Bezos been around, anybody like that?
What's his name from Facebook?
Mark Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg lives a couple blocks from me, and that's not to say that I live in a mansion. But I do live on the hill. I live in an apartment on the hill, and he's got a mansion at the top of the hill. But I never see him. I just hear the neighbors complain he was like working on that house for like 3 years. So there's all kinds of neighbor complaints about the construction. But you never see him about town. I don't know. And the rest of them I don't know. I do have a number of very successful tech entrepreneurs who are customers of mine, and they are probably very big celebrities in their worlds, but to me they're Mike and Joe, and some of them I don't even know their names. Like, oh, you're the double old fashioned guy.
Right. You know them by their drinks.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it seems like Elixir is pretty ingrained in San Francisco and the culture that's built there. Do you think that other Elixir establishments could work around the U.S. or in Madrid or London or anywhere else in the world?
Yeah. I mean, we I wanted a neighborhood bar, and I wanted a bar that was going to be open 7 days a week. And what's ironic is I opened it in the shadow of the .com bust, and because I didn't want to have to weather another layoff ever, and I wanted to build something that made money every day, no matter what, because in the .com bust, the things that were busy were bars and coffee shops. Everyone was unemployed, but everyone was drinking coffee and booze. And I thought, people drink in good times and bad. So a bar is recession proof, and I won't have to, I'll have ups and downs, but I won't have to face this again. Never would have I ever expected that a virus would be what made my industry like the poster child for failure. I think that at our core of being a neighborhood bar, a gathering place with a number of specializations, being our cocktails and our whiskey collection, and we still have the feel and the charm of a neighborhood bar, and that works anywhere in the world. And so I would love to pick this up and go put one in some of my favorite spots in the world. And honestly, the only thing holding me back from doing that is that I have a 7-year-old, and I'm very happy to spend as much time as I can with her and my family and focusing on that, which has become much more important to me.
Absolutely. Family first, always.
Yeah.
So how is the bar scene different from New Jersey to San Francisco?
I don't spend that much time in Jersey anymore. My mom is there, and I've got a lot of friends there. I don't really know the bar scene that well, other than when I'm back on the shore. I was supposed to be on the Jersey Shore next week. Summer plans have been canceled. So I don't really know, to be honest. And I don't travel like I used to as a consultant. I used to be on the road a lot, going from city to city and visiting all of the bars and meeting all of the bartenders, which is really how I kind of made my name nationally, was just being on the road with Square One. Every time I'd come to town, I was on the cover of magazines, and my cocktails were featured and things. We were listed as one of the top 25 cocktails and bars in America in 2008, and top 20 cocktails in 2007. And press like that was great for raising the awareness of the bar, and gave me entree and into these markets to meet the up and coming bartenders, as well as the well-established ones, and forging incredible relationships with those people. I remember going to Boston. I went to Boston College, but I went back to Boston as a well-known bartender representing Square One, and I got to meet John Gertzen and Jackson Cannon and Misty Coffin, and the original crews of each of these cities are the best bartenders, and they're all great friends of mine today. And so that was a ton of fun, but I don't get out like that anymore, so I don't get to see these different places. And I see what's happening in a city the same way everyone else does, by their Instagram posts or their social media.
Right. That's awesome that you've made these connections all around the world. So I have a question about your bar. If we were to go there and get one cocktail, you said you've been top 20, top 25 in the world, or in the United States. What cocktail should we get if we go to Elixir?
Would probably be the Pamplemousse au Poivre. I'm a judge in the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, amongst some others, but that one, we arguably have 40 to 50 of the best palates in the country. Most of them, some of the top bartenders in the country. 2018, for the first time, they put a challenge out to all of us and said, we're going to have a cocktail competition between you. And so, and you have to make a cocktail with, it was Banez Mezcal, which was the best in class Mezcal winner from the year before. They said, we want you to use Banez Mezcal and make a cocktail, and we're going to have a competition. And it's going to be labeled, cocktail of the year, and which a lot of competitions label, but coming from the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, it had a lot of clout, and I won with that recipe. And ever since it's been our best-selling cocktail at the bar. Quite delicious, moves like crazy, and one of my prouder moments in cocktail competitions, mostly because of the field of competitors I was up against.
Congratulations. That's quite the accomplishment.
Thanks. Yeah. It's a great drink. I drink it all the time. And I don't even drink cocktails that much anymore. I mostly drink straight spirits and beer, but I'll have that drink when I sit down at my home bar.
So what is the base of that drink? What do you make it with? If you can tell us, that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything's on my website. If you go to elixirsf.com and you go to our menu page, there you can download a PDF of our last couple. I have to look back on that page now, but last couple of menus, and those PDFs have all of the recipes as well. So everything's on there, and including with this one, when I made it, I had done I had been in a competition with Marie Brizard a number of years ago where I did fairly well. I didn't win. I met some people and made some relationships, and actually, well, one of the cocktails I made was on the cover of the New York Times, but that got some notice with them. But they launched a new line of liqueurs they called essences, and they sent me a bottle of this Essence de Poivre, and they said it was a little 500 ml bottle, and they said, could you make some cocktails with this and let us know what you come up with? I was like, okay, yeah, it's nice, normally I get paid for that. So if I get around to it and I play with it, and yeah, I'll send them something. But they didn't send me a contract and say, hey, we'd like to hire you to create a number of cocktails. So this competition came up, and I was just playing around in the back, and I had this idea for a Paloma, a spin on a Paloma with mezcal. And I was also at the time just getting into the Giffard, I don't know how you pronounce it, their liqueurs, and they had this Pamplemousse rosé that I thought was delicious. And I thought if I could play with that to get my grapefruit flavor in a Paloma type thing, but put a little bit of a twist on it. And I saw that bottle of the Essence de Poivre, and I was like, oh, a little pepper in that. And it was Sichuan pepper is the main focus of that, although it's not super strong in the Sichuan flavor. I put it in, and it was great. It was refreshing. It was, had that same kind of Paloma refreshing feel, but it was mezcal and pepper and a little bit off center there. And then I made a cone out of so I shook it and served it up in a cocktail coupe, and I made a cone out of a lemon peel and filled the cone with pink peppercorn. That was the garnish. So if you just do a Google search on Pamplemousse au Poivre, you'll see the articles that came out after and photos and the recipes and stuff. But the recipes will probably all say Marie Brizard. Which funny thing is, I won the competition, and afterwards I come back and I send an email to the people at Marie Brizard saying, so you asked me to make something, and look, I won cocktail of the year with this. Here's the recipe. I thought they'd be thrilled with that, and they wrote back and said, that's great, congratulations, but sorry, we're not going to be. Oh, and I was like, where can I get it? I can't find it. I want to put it on my menu. And they said, oh, sorry, we're not going to sell that in the United States.
What?
Why?
I don't know. They just didn't launch that line here in the U.S. So I had to reverse engineer it. And so when you download the PDF off my website with the recipe, it has the recipe for the cordial that I make, that I call Elixir de Poivre. I use 120 proof vodka, actually made by Square One. It's called Dolan Heart. Not a lot of people know it, but if you can find it, it's 120 proof, really well-made wheat vodka out of Distilled Resources in Idaho. I use that, macerate some pink peppercorn, Sichuan peppers, and then I used a little bit of coriander seed to get some citrus notes into it, and it makes a delicious cordial. Then I mix that 1-to-1 with simple syrup, and that's what we use. So it's a unique drink. It's possible to make it at home if you pull together that cordial. It's not too hard for a lot of home bartenders. It's just a simple maceration.
So you've been in the bar industry a while. What do you have to do to get a palate to, try different drinks when you're mixing different drinks? What do you do when you're creating drinks to get unique combinations?
Start with the focal point, which is usually the base spirit, and an idea. Where do I want to go with this? What is this? When would you drink this drink? Is this, Is this a slow sipper? Is it a poolside cocktail? Like where do I want to be with this? That kind of takes a back seat because my first approach is always flavor combinations. So if I always want to highlight whatever the main thing is that I'm focused on. So if it's a liqueur and it's high proof enough, that can take center stage. If it's a liqueur and it's a lower proof, then you want to make it a lower proof cocktail, whatever it is, right? So in that first pour, whether it's a straight spirit or liqueur, or even if it's built around, I've done some consulting for some tea companies where I've created drinks for Mighty Leaf Tea or Numi Tea that have to highlight the tea. And so you just want to look for the complementing flavors and then decide where you want to arrive in a texture and try to build upon those things. Don't let it get overly complicated so that the flavors get muddled and lost. If you can't taste an ingredient that doesn't have a role, then why put it in? So finding the right balance of those flavors, figure out what kind of texture you want on the drink, and then once you have the liquid down, then think about the ice or not, the ice or lack of ice, and the glassware and the garnish. Those are kind of like the last steps to tying it all together. Make it look good, make it feel good. How will the ice or lack of ice affect the drinking experience? And think about the drinking experience from start to finish.
Thank you. Those are all really helpful tips. I can't wait to start trying my own drinks. After the show, me and Joey will go and we'll experiment with some different spirits we got laying around.
Oh, yeah.
But you started as a cook and you transitioned into a cocktail guru. Did you do the same kind of experimental trial and error with food as well?
Yeah, I guess I learned it in food. I didn't trial and error and creativity in the kitchen for me was always at home. I was never in a leadership role in a kitchen, other than in Beaver Creek, Colorado. I was at the Covered Bridge Cafe. I was running the kitchen, which was at the base of the mountain, base of the slopes, and it was just all nachos and burgers. It's what you want when you get off a ski slope. And actually, it was like I would cook a shift in the kitchen, then I'd jump behind the bar, and that's where I would take stuff out of the kitchen, and I'd be making syrups and unique things. And I was always creative behind the bar more so than in the kitchen as a job. I definitely do it at home. I make stuff all the time at home. I mean, when you have a family and you cook every day, we cook everything, not only just now because of the whole COVID situation, but we always have. We don't buy anything prepackaged. We buy raw ingredients and we cook all the time, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so that's a healthy way to eat, but it's also a tiring way to eat because every day you're like, okay, what's the next meal? If you don't do any meal planning or you don't have some go-tos, it gets tiring. And then when you get tired of eating the same thing, then it pushes you to be creative and go look for new things. So that fact alone will often inspire me to create a new cocktail, because I'll have made something new at home with an ingredient maybe I never played with before. And I'll be like, oh, I'll taste a new ingredient and be like, oh, this will work really well with this spirit. And away I go.
Absolutely. And it seems like you've got a pretty good grasp on the cocktail side of things. If you can taste something with food and then automatically think about how it's going to transition into the drink flavor profile, that's pretty impressive. I don't know many people that can do that. I certainly cannot. So one I can think of, though, actually, one of our podcasts releasing in 2 days is Frankie Solaric from Bar Chef Toronto. I don't know if you've heard of him, because it's pretty far across across the way. But yeah, he was talking about some of the same combinations you were in getting to the palate. So
no, I'm not familiar with him.
He's very big into aromatics and the aesthetic of Bar Chef, which is his bar in the heart of Toronto. He's very big into like aromatics and stimulating the other senses while drinking. Do you have a strong opinion on how drinks should smell or look when they're presented to a guest?
Absolutely. I mean, there are a number of creative ways to affect aroma, and we went through a period in the late 2000s where creativity went wild to the point of going overboard, where we got people doing a lot of 8 to 10, 12 ingredient cocktails that weren't tiki. If you're not in tiki and you're going over 6 ingredients, you're stepping on, thin ice. A lot of those processes, a lot of things that you can do for that. I shied away from it at Elixir because of the execution factor behind a professional bar and time. I was getting crazy myself with a lot of these drinks and pissing off my staff because I put together, I was so excited about them that I would put together a 10 or 12 item cocktail menu. All of them were muddled, infused, burnt, all kinds of things, and it hurt me as a business because I had those, and everybody went through this back then. We just had these long waits, and everybody's like, I love craft cocktails, but I hate the wait. And so as a business, as an industry, I think we all came around to the fact that you've got to do a lot of the work for that kind of stuff up front on the back end so that you can execute quickly and get the drinks over the counter. And very often the techniques for creating aromatics can be that one bit of flair that makes a difference for people. So you can batch a whole bunch of stuff and have your cocktail come out in 2 quick pours. And then you can burn a citrus peel or use a smoker or use an atomizer or, to put an aromatic, and that the squeeze of an atomizer or the lighting of a match or the use of some kitchen tool can be that one little thing that people go, ooh, and then they don't care about the fact that it didn't take you 5 pours to stir that, before you stirred that cocktail. So it's not only important for the culinary appreciation of the drink, having a good aromatic and a pretty garnish and the right glass. Those are all important because those are the senses that a customer sees, hears, smells before they get to taste it. It sets up anticipation and gets them excited, part of the entertainment factor. So you need to coordinate all of those aspects in putting together something that you can get over the counter quickly and make money on.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, my roommate's walking in. All right, so I have a quick question for you. What is your favorite cocktail if you were to make one at home?
For a long time, in the last several years, I've been very focused on spirits. I've done a lot of cognac work. I got involved with the BNIA and got very into Armagnac. Unfortunately, I don't get to do much paid work for them, but I still love my Armagnac and promote them. And of course, Elixir as a whiskey bar, I have lots of great whiskey and rum as well. When I was working for WORSPA and the ACR program, I got incredible access to rum and traveled all over the Caribbean and did some travel outside of them as well, visiting Martinique and Cuba. So I have tons of great spirits at home. And so I tend to, and again, I have a 7-year-old. So for the last 7 years, 8 years, I haven't done a lot of drinking at home, but when I do, I sit down and I have 1 or 2, and it's usually late at night. And so I usually sip a nice spirit. But with Fresh Victor now and COVID, I've been home a lot, and I've been using I have a beautiful home bar that is it's an old Victorian sideboard from late 19th century, and it's pretty well stocked with everything I need. So I've been making a lot of cocktails at home with Fresh Victor and filming them to build out our Fresh Victor YouTube channel and create content for our social media and that kind of stuff. So it's been fun to play with drinks at home, where I used to not drink much at home because of the family. Now it's a business excuse, so I can say, but honey, I've got to make a couple of cocktails, and then you make mistakes, and I live by the motto of drink your mistakes, and so I've been enjoying playing with Fresh Victor, but right now the first stuff we're getting out are a lot of basic recipes like margarita with our Mexican lime and agave product, and making margaritas and pisco sours and daiquiris and gimlets, and then we have a cactus pear and pomegranate mixer, those are the 2 flavors that have first come out on our direct-to-consumer website. With that availability, I've been focusing on those two products, and I made I call it the improved Cape Codder with our cactus pear and pomegranate, using that instead of cranberry, or a cactus pear cosmopolitan with that. I make a Paloma with that. I call it the Palm Paloma, and those are all just delicious drinks, and I've been making those at home a lot. So normally it would be just like an old fashioned or a Sazerac, but lately it's a lot more of these juicy summery drinks. Today, actually, when we get off, I've got to go. Pina Colada Day is coming up, so I have to go make and shoot and take photos of a Fresh Victor pineapple ginger pina colada. I've been making painkillers. I went on vacation in January to St. John, USVI, and drank a bunch of painkillers, which I had never really had the opportunity to just sit on the beach and drink a bunch of painkillers. So I came home with a painkiller fetish, and I created the Fresh Victor painkiller, which we sell as a cocktail kit through Elixir delivery, and has been selling like mad.
So I'm actually a huge fan of pina coladas, but what is a painkiller? I've never heard of that.
Painkiller is, it's one of those drinks that actually has a trademark from the Pusser's Rum. Created it in the British Virgin Islands, and they trademarked it. And Giuseppe Gonzalez, so it's named his bar after that in New York, and they came after him legally, and so the whole industry kind of came down on Pusser's for pursuing legal action against him for naming his bar that, because they had the trademark on the name. He can't legally use it, I guess. They did change the name of the bar, but it's just, they use Pusser's Rum, which is a dark navy style rum. I use a mixture of two other rums. I use Plantation OFTD for some kick and punch, and alcoholic kick and funky punch from the Jamaican rum in it. The Plantation Original Dark. So those two rums are in there. Put traditionally pineapple juice and coconut, cream of coconut, and that's it. Real simple. It's a great tropical, delicious drink that is, it's excellent on the rocks or over crushed ice or turned into a slushie.
That sounds so good. I could go for one of those right about now.
Yeah, I would highly recommend it.
And you also, so with Fresh Victor, you guys do shows. Is it like weekly or monthly for people that are subscribed to your class?
Oh, I forgot on the painkiller, there's orange juice in there too, and nutmeg over the top. I didn't finish that.
Nice.
Very nice.
I'm sorry. Would you ask about the virtual classes?
Yeah. So for the virtual classes, how often do new episodes release?
We don't do episodes. I do private classes and ticketed classes. So when I had the Boothby Center years ago, I started doing all these classes because I needed the revenue to pay the rent there. It was very expensive. And so we always had ticketed classes for the public, because the idea was also just to get the public educated on cocktails. But the crapshoot with ticketed events is, if you don't market them well enough, you could end up with only one or two tickets sold, and then you don't make much revenue, but you have to put out just as much work. It's much better when you can have a full room and you've got a good amount of revenue for the same amount of work, or slightly incrementally more work. But with a private event, you got a private client, especially corporate clients, they're paying upfront for a set amount of people. I take all payments 100% upfront, so I'm never chasing people down, and I know what I'm getting into. So I've done the same thing with the virtual events. We're doing private events that are team building events, which actually in the virtual world that works out really well, because you can have your team spread everywhere. I did one for a software company a few weeks ago where we had people from California to London, and we did it at 8:00 in the morning Pacific time. It was an early morning of drinking for the West Coasters, but people in London were thrilled. I've got another one coming up that's actually going to go all the way to Poland. So that makes it fun. And another fun thing about the online classes is when I'm teaching a cocktail class to a group of people in one room, you get that one-on-one experience, which is really nice, and you get to meet people, and everybody has questions and they have a really good time. But you're talking to them a lot of the time, even the corporate events, you're talking to them about their home bar and things they can buy for their home bar, how to make drinks at home, how to look at cocktail menus and understand how to order and what you are getting when you go to a cocktail bar. But when you're doing it virtually, they are literally in their kitchen or in their home bar. And you can see them. And there's this whole other level of personal connection where you're like, oh, show me that tool. Where did you get that? Oh, you bought that at Walmart? Or this was my grandmother's cocktail shaker. Or, you get stories like that, or people be like, what about this rum? This is all they had at my local store. And you can tell them about that rum and why they should or shouldn't buy it again, or what else they could get, So it's been really fun.
That's really cool. And like you said, you get to pretty much see inside someone else's house and see how they make the drinks. And it adds like another element to it that wasn't previously accessible or available. You touch on a lot of the good things about your virtual classes, but what's something that's pretty difficult for you?
Technical difficulties. I went through a lot of trial and error. I have all my companies. I'm a Google guy, so I don't own any Apple equipment and everything. I have an Android phone, and my company is on, it's organized through Google Enterprise apps. And so with an enterprise account on Google, you get free Google Meet. So I was like, why should I pay for a Zoom account when I have Google Meet? So I ran a lot of initial stuff on Google Meet, and it just isn't as good as Zoom. So now I have a Zoom account as well. And then, I've been doing a bunch of podcasts and video interviews and sitting on video panels or remote panels. And so I've gotten to work with a few different platforms, like this one that we're using with you today is a new one to me. So I'm getting exposed to different platforms as well. And then there's connectivity issues. I was doing a panel discussion last week for the Golden Gate Restaurant Association, talking about the reopening of bars. And I set up in my bar with my laptop and with my bar as the backdrop. And I had done that a number of times and run some cocktail classes from right there. But for some reason that day, the internet wasn't working well in the bar.
No.
So it was like 2 minutes to showtime, and I couldn't get a connection. I couldn't hear anybody. It was all crackling. And I had to scramble and get back to my office and set up on a wired connection. And so there's little things like that. Even I've definitely found the benefit of 15 to 30 minutes prior to an event to make sure all the technology is working properly. Yeah,
with doing remote podcasts, we've had a couple scares here and there.
We've been pretty lucky though.
We've been pretty fortunate that none of our guests or us, we've lost internet, nothing like that's happened. But we definitely know the importance of preparation when it comes to online meetings. That's something we've been trying to get better about, is just 5-10 minutes, just at least make sure you're prepared.
Yeah, like I did, my friend Gina Shersavani in Washington, D.C. owns a few bars, and she has a podcast called Designated Drinker, the Designated Drinker Show. And I was asked to be on that, and we did it as a Zoom call as well, so they could put it on the YouTube channel. And we did the whole show, and afterwards they let me know that they had technical difficulty. One of the speakers on the show, one of the hosts, was not recorded, or I can't remember what the problem was. But basically, we had to redo the entire thing.
Oh no! Was it at least easier the second time around?
Yeah, great. Yeah. You can. Go check it out. The Designated Drinker podcast.
Oh, we'll definitely check it out after this.
It was a really good. It was a really fun. They're both great, and it was a really fun show and all. And so it was actually really fun to do it a second time.
That's good. At least you enjoyed it.
Yeah, totally.
So H, you touched on hosting all these events, whether public or private. How much does your business background, between having an MBA and working in business development, how much does that factor into your ability to market your businesses?
I'm a marketing guy. I'm not a finance guy, unfortunately. I can manage my finances well enough to stay in business, but I lean on good advisors for a lot of that. And from a marketing perspective, I've cut my teeth, just a lot of trial and error over the years on different things. And there's a lot of people I need to lean on to make marketing work. I have a good sense of strategy and goals when it comes to technology and stuff. With social media moves at a very rapid pace, so I lean on some people who focus on that a little more for their expertise. I dabble in it and manage a lot of my own accounts, but I also I'm always looking to improve. And if I could afford more, I would honestly, quite honestly, I would outsource most of it. When I was running a PR firm in Madrid after I finished my MBA, I learned all about PR. I learned all about messaging and how to manage corporate messaging, and that was what really led to when I opened the bar. I knew right away that telling a good story would get me noticed and improve business. But I also know that you have to have a story in order to be able to tell a story. So I didn't do anything with PR for the first few years because I was trying to figure out what my story was. Just being a friendly neighborhood bar on the corner was not much of a story. And it was the decision to ditch all of my artificial ingredients and 2/3 of my staff, which, that was that HR lesson I had learned, that I was hiring the wrong people and bad people. One day I just came in and I fired 2/3 of my staff. A much greater concern with who I hired to replace them. I got rid of all of my bad ingredients and replaced everything with fresh produce and put my culinary background to work at creating new cocktails and doing research on writing my first cocktail menu. And I just made all these dramatic changes to create a story. And I had my head down so hard working to make those changes that I wasn't focused on telling the story. But before I knew it, the press had taken notice, and I was naturally getting press. And so from there, I was able to build upon the story and kick in my understanding of public relations and marketing to amplify it. And so without the MBA, I probably would not have tied all of that together. The MBA helped me write a great business plan. I always say it was the best book I ever wrote. It was 79 pages. It was a beautifully written document, in my opinion. Probably put a lot of people to sleep, but I'm still proud of it 17 years later.
A 79-page business plan?
Ooh. With all the graphs and with all the like the designs and photos, and yeah, it's pretty big. Spiral bound. Back then, in 2003, I gathered all the potential investors, and I had enough money verbally committed, but I literally printed and spiral bound the business plan with all of the legal documents, put them all into individual FedEx envelopes and sent them out all to the potential investors physically by mail, and then said, okay, I got to give everybody a couple of weeks to read it over and digest it, and hopefully the checks will come in. Whereas today, you'd send off a PDF.
Yep.
By email. So, things like that, business planning, tying it all together, having a vision, understanding what the different functions of marketing are, and then every different function of business, actually. And then, you do what you do well and outsource everything else. Don't spin your wheels doing things that you're not good at, nor that you like, that you don't like doing. That will ultimately keep you happy and effective.
Yeah, I'm sure one of the investors, or any of the investors that got your delivery in the mail, they were probably pretty impressed. A 79-page business plan with, graphs and pictures. Finances. Yeah, it's like closer to a white paper than anything. Yeah. But no, that's very cool. And that's something that we have not heard much on the show, is people getting investors for, a restaurant or a bar. Mm-hmm. Do you know if that's any different than people that are seeking investments in, the tech space, or people that are trying to secure investments for, I don't know, some innovative idea?
Yeah, it's no matter what, it's risky. It's a very high risk venture. The failure rates for bars and restaurants hasn't changed other than recently. It's gotten much worse. So it's always a risky venture, and that was another reason why I backed it all up with a really solid plan. Ultimately, in something like this, people are betting on you more than the plan, but writing a good plan gives you a roadmap. That's what it is. It allows you to organize all of your thoughts and show that you've covered all the bases and that you've thought about everything from the cost of a bookkeeper on a weekly basis to what kind of poor costs are we going to have and how am I going to get the word out. Reading through a well-written business plan just shows that you've covered every base and gives the investor the opportunity to say, what about this, that, and the other thing? Have you thought about this or that? And that actually can also help you make sure that you answer every angle, and then that you're going into the venture on a solid footing. Writing a business plan, whether or not you're raising capital, is always important. They always say maintaining the business plan, reviewing it, rewriting it every year is important. I haven't done that. Once you get going, it's crazy. And I had one group of investors that were used to investing in commercial real estate and energy projects. And they put $25,000 into my project. And within months, they were needling me for monthly financial reports. And I said, I don't have time to produce monthly financial reports for you. I'm busting my ass every day, not sleeping, bartending, paying myself as a bartender, barely getting by. And you want to look at the minutia? There's no minutia. If I take time to do that, there's going to be no bar. Funny thing is that one of those investors literally just reached out to me yesterday for the first time in probably 15 years, asking me my opinion on a potential investment in a tequila company. Made me laugh.
No. So have you done any investing yourself?
Only in myself, only in my own stuff. Quite honestly, I've never made enough money to invest in a lot of other stuff. More like,
it seems like investing in yourself has worked out so far. So, I'd keep investing in you.
Thanks. Yeah, reinvesting. If I were super successful and I had a bunch of money to invest in other things, there was a lot of stuff I would love to invest in. Fortunately, I haven't gotten there.
And you touched on how, your business plan, pretty much secured some funding where you need to be going, and it was pretty much a roadmap for your business. They say that the best business plans are the ones that anybody could pick up if you died or, your business was in a different state or a different location. Anybody could pick up your business plan and literally execute on what you've already established. And I think that's part of the reason why you're so keen on your processes and procedures and your systems in place, because it seems like you have a really well-oiled machine, and that just goes back to your business plan from what it sounds like from the outside.
Yeah. Again, like right now is probably actually a very good time to rewrite a business plan. This is, and I guess essentially I am. I am working on the reinvention of Elixir. Very few bars and restaurants are going to be able to come out of this thing being what they were before. So you have to reinvent yourself for financial survival, for new physical operations, for new emotional client perspectives and expectations. There's all kinds of things you have to consider we're going into a new environment, a new world. So you can't expect to just reopen the way you were. And that requires planning.
It's the new normal that everyone keeps talking about, right?
Yeah, you look at my buddy Tobin Ellis in Las Vegas owns a company called Bar Magic, and on barmagic.com you can follow the stuff he's been doing. He's an amazingly talented, smart, well-spoken professional who wrote a a revival guide. He calls it. You can download it on his Bar Magic website, and he surveyed a bunch of people as to what they were doing, what they anticipated. And he covered all the bases. And I just saw yesterday that Dave Kaplan and Alex and Devin and everybody over at Death and Co. They posted their reopening game plan. So, people are putting the effort into actually writing new plans so they can communicate how to do it. And the cool thing is we're now in an era in the bar business where those people are sharing that. They're literally putting it out in PDF format and allowing everybody to read what their plan is and see how to do it and use it as a model. That was not the bar business that I grew up in. I'm 51, and the bar business of the 80s and 90s was keep to yourself. The bar business, it was mostly because so much of it was cash back then. So everybody was hiding cash. Nobody wanted to talk about how they ran their business or the things they did because they were putting cash in their pockets so they didn't have to pay the IRS. Nowadays, we live in a world that's 90% credit card payments. So everything's traceable. There's nothing to hide. That's one thing on a business level. And then the other is just what's happened in the last 10 years in the cocktail. The way the cocktail revival has driven a bar revival. It's changed the way that bars are managed. And one of those big changes is this kind of open your kimono kind of sharing of good, bad, and ugly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like on your website, I wouldn't expect to see the recipes for your drinks. Maybe I'm in the older mindset where, bars usually keep their secret recipes or like their secret sauce to themselves and don't really let the patrons in on it. But it's very cool that I could literally go to your website, I could see all the ingredients you use, and I could attempt to replicate that. It probably wouldn't be as good.
I was going to say, I don't think yours would be as good, but...
Well, one of the things I've learned about teaching cocktails to consumers is that everybody wants to learn and they're hungry for knowledge. And I always, it's a phrase I use on my Elixir to Go website and all my Elixir to Go marketing is cocktail edutainment. Like people want to learn because learning is fun and cocktails are fun to learn about. And they'll try it and they'll set up their home bar and they'll buy all their ingredients. And some people will get it and they'll continue doing it regularly and make those drinks and play with their own ideas, and they'll go down this geeky path of really getting into it. But I would say the greater majority of people will do it once and then they'll say, I'd rather have somebody else make it for me. And that's kind of the premise behind Fresh Victor. We've made these fresh juice based cocktail mixers that are healthy and clean and high quality and stable in the refrigerator over time and economically priced, and they make it easy. Our whole tagline is craft cocktails made easy. We make it easy for people to just put two things in a glass, shake it, and have a great drink. And if you want to build two or three things on top of that, you can do that as well. But it tackles that little bit of a hurdle for people. If it's kind of like, if I have to do two things, okay, I can do two things. But if you want me to do three things, you're crazy. There's a fine line for most consumers when it comes to that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm one of those people. I don't really take too much time to make food or go out of my way to, craft specialty drinks or anything like that. I'm very easygoing, and I don't really like to get too complicated in the kitchen. And I think with, the product line that you have with Fresh Victor, it really does help the normal consumer, especially someone like myself who's fresh out of college and still learning, how to cook and how to prepare drinks. I think that's like a sweet spot for me, is I would pick that up and at least attempt to make drinks at this point.
Fun stuff.
Elixir is one of the oldest saloons in San Francisco. Do you have any good ghost stories that accompany an old building?
Ghost stories. I have one. I was in 2003 when we were renovating, the floor. So the bar itself is actually 1907. There's been nothing but a saloon on that corner since 1858, which is the earliest documented proof I have. It's possible that it goes back a bit farther than that, as we are in the oldest neighborhood of San Francisco. We're 1 block from the Mission Dolores Church, which is where Junipero Serra, the Spanish priest who led the pilgrimage up the coast, set up the mission for San Francisco. And you can see it when you walk out Elixir's front door. And this area was primarily Spanish settlers, Ohlone Indian, and some Irish from about 1846 to through the gold rush and up to 1858. So 10, 12 years prior to 1848 actually, there were only maybe 500 people in this area. I mean this part of the peninsula, mostly Spanish ranchers and Indians, Ohlone Indians, and then that exploded with the gold rush. So the likelihood of there being much there between 1858 and 1848 is kind of low, and if it is, it's there's definitely nothing before 1848. So, and I have some old sketches of the neighborhood and stuff to rely on that. So we go back almost as long as the neighborhood, and every piece of evidence I have of this corner shows it as a saloon. So in 1906, with the Great Earthquake and Fire, the original saloon burned down. It was then owned by a gentleman named Patrick J. McGinnis, and he was the longest running proprietor from 1893 until 1933. He had it for 40 years. He not only survived the 1906 fire and rebuilt, because the building didn't survive, the building burned down, but he rebuilt. And the saloon that he rebuilt in 1907 is the saloon we have today. And then he also survived through Prohibition by running the place as a soft drink parlor, which is what it was listed in all of the business directories. So, one of the things I've said a lot about the current situation is this bar has lived through the 1906 earthquake and fire, World War I, World War II, Prohibition, the dot-com bust, the 2008 meltdown, and now this, assuming we'll survive this. So when we were rebuilding the floor, because the floor was rotted after 100 years. It was like a trampoline when I bought it. We ripped up some of the floorboards and we put in there's a subflooring, we put in a support beam, and it's about a 3-foot crawl space under there. And I replaced all of the plumbing under the bar because it was nasty, rotted, 100-year-old piping. And so we were replacing the plumbing under there, and it was probably 3 o'clock in the morning. I was working. The plumber worked late with me. He was under there, and I heard something that sounded like a little bit of like a like a little shock.
Yeah.
I didn't see anything, and I let it go. And then the next day, he told me that while he was lying on his back, looking up, putting in piping along the floor, he felt something cross his face, and when he looked over, he turned and he looked over, and he saw a woman in a white dress lying beside him. And that's what he screamed. And he didn't want to tell me that night because he didn't want to scare me. And he said he looked at her for a few seconds, and then he looked away in shock, and then of course she was gone. And 2 other times in that 52-day stretch of doing the renovations, I was in there by myself, and I felt like I saw somebody walking across the floor. Both times it looked like a male in a dark suit. And I swore that a couple of things moved. And so that's really it. Those are my experiences, and honestly, nothing since in the last 17 years. Several times, I'm in there, especially now, I'm in there a lot late night by myself, because I'll put my family to bed and I'll go down to the bar to do inventory on the delivery business or to film some Fresh Victor videos or do something. I'll often think like, I'm going to see a ghost. Am I here alone? But I don't see anything.
That's so terrifying.
I was going to say, that's one of the best ones. We usually ask this question pretty much every show, and that's probably one of the top ones we've heard so far.
The one, yeah, with your friend laying underneath the pipes and then seeing a woman in a white dress next to him.
That is scary.
That's nightmare fuel.
No doubt. Maybe they just like the way you renovated it, so they stopped coming.
Yeah, crazy stuff.
So, what is your hangover recipe? I know you said you don't drink that much anymore, but when you did, what was your hangover recipe?
A hamburger. Usually a hamburger and some exercise.
That's a good combination. If we're going to get a hamburger in San Fran, where should we go?
Oh, good call. One of my favorites is just a half block away at a beer bar called the Monk's Kettle. Another one that was really good just closed for good. Where else do I love the burger? There's a place called Burger. Oh, I can't even think of the name now. Benoe Valley that I go to with my daughter all the time. But there's a, I love the In-N-Out style of burger, and there's a burger chain here started by a restaurateur who owns a number of different good restaurants. His company's called Back of House, and he's got a place called Beretta that was on the kind of the forefront of cocktail-driven restaurants a while back. I'm trying to think of the name of his burger places now. I don't know. It'll come to me. I'm kind of blanking. Super duper burger.
So what were you saying, Joey?
All right. So if we're in San Francisco and we're going to get a burger, where should we go?
There's a place down the street about a half block from Elixir called the Monk's Kettle, which has a great burger. It's kind of my go-to in the hood. And there's a really good local chain called Super Duper Burger. I like going to theirs. That restaurateur, Adriano Paganini, he's got some of the best restaurants in town. They're most successful, at least. And I like their burgers. Those are like the cheap and quick ones. The Monk's Kettle is like a good sit down, get both hands around it kind of burger.
Ooh, that sounds pretty good.
Oh yeah.
So you've been in the bar industry for a little while now, and there's been an initiative to make the food and beverage industry go green. And I know you've been a proponent of that. What are some things that other restaurants and bars can do to help in saving the earth and going green?
I think the basic green messages are our operations, and they're the things that are most sensible, that have the biggest impact. I always said the bar industry uses energy and water. And if you're using energy efficient refrigeration, minimizing your water waste, reducing your toxins and chemicals that you use for cleaning, storage, and preserving any of that. Those are the main ways to do it. Make sure your plumbing doesn't leak. Make sure you've got flow control on your water output. You're cleaning your filters on your refrigeration and your ice machines, and you're gonna be able to run a very efficient operation that's going to save you money. Good green. I would say green good business is good business. You're saving, reducing. Anywhere where you're saving, reducing means you're saving, reducing costs. So just paying attention to those things will have a big impact. And then there's like the more social and bigger picture issues of sourcing, who you're buying from, which products to support, where they're coming from. Buying locally means reducing carbon footprints and transportation and supporting local economy.
Sounds good. And it sounds like other bartenders and other restaurants should follow suit. If you weren't owning a bar and you didn't have your other ventures within the bar scene and the restaurant industry business, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
I don't know. I mean, I might have gone back to tech. When I got my MBA at Thunderbird, it was Thunderbird is a global MBA program. It's for many years been the number one international MBA program in the world, or at least in the country. And you go to Thunderbird as a very particular school because you want a very particular career path in global business. And that career path is not handcuffing yourself to 1,000 square foot bar in one domestic city. So I didn't exactly pursue the Thunderbird path, and I think which is what I was so amped about when I went there and why I went there. Opening a bar was a reaction to a bad economy. It was also a realization of, what I love doing and embracing my past a bit. So if I hadn't done it, I probably would have leaned back on my Thunderbird background and my international background and my goal or to live and work multilingually, multinationally. I had been putting that in the tech industry, and if I'd continued to be a little disheartened with tech, I probably would have found my way into something else. Not sure what that would have been. Actually, when I graduated, I had been studying the auto industry as a model for global manufacturing. So that was of interest. And I didn't get a job in that because when I graduated at the end of '97, we also had a recession. We had a bust. We were in a boom period in '96, '97, especially in manufacturing, where the emerging, what they called the Asian tiger economies of Southeast Asia were growing, and the Latin American economies of Brazil and Argentina were growing. There was a lot of manufacturing growth in those areas, and that's where I was trying to get in, so I could go live in primarily Latin America. I wanted to speak Spanish, but I spoke German, so I got a job offer before I graduated with BMW in Munich, and I didn't take it. And then the industry dried up and those offers dried up. I ended up in Spain because I couldn't find a job, and I was living on my friend's couch. A friend of mine got a job in Madrid in pharmaceuticals, and I lived on his couch, and I taught English to business people. I taught business English as a way to get by until I could find a job, and then I found that PR job out of the blue. Went out of the blue, but I didn't mean to be in PR. So, things happen for a reason. You fall into things, you stumble around, and you end up where you end up.
That's crazy that so you speak 3 different languages?
Not so much anymore.
Wow,
I spoke
awesome.
German well. The thing with languages, if you don't use them, you lose them. So
that is very true. So I have a pretty good one. You've been all around the world and you've seen all these places. I want to know, what is the most thrill-seeking thing you've done anywhere around the world?
For my 40th birthday, my brother lives in Indonesia. And for my 40th birthday, I went and spent a couple of weeks with him. And 5 days of that trip, we did a liveaboard dive trip in the Komodo Sea. And so for 5 days, I did 4 dives a day through some of the highest currents, deepest dives, most crazy National Geographic type adventure diving you can imagine. And my brother's a master diver, and he's an amazing person, and he's an amazing diver, and I just followed him, and he took me on some crazy shit. We did some wild stuff, and I would never venture to do that again at this point in my life. I'm not that adventurous anymore, and between that and some of the backcountry skiing I did in Vail when I was a ski bum in Vail, went into some crazy stuff and off some big cliffs and did some stuff that it's amazing I survived.
That's awesome, though. That's a pretty unique one, diving through Indonesia. I'm sure you've seen just a crazy amount of stuff there.
Yeah. When he moved to Indonesia in '99, which was a rough time too. It was the end of the Suharto era and beginning of democracy, and then we went through the post 9/11 era when there were a lot of bombs in Indonesia. It's the largest Muslim country in the world. He lived through all of that, and I would visit him once a year in those years. So I spent a lot of time in Indonesia and watched it evolve through the 2000s. It's still crazy. He's locked down in Jakarta now.
Is that their capital?
Yeah, it is. For now, they recently voted to move it, but that alone is going to be an incredible debacle.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
All right, so as we wind down the show here, what is one piece of advice or a life lesson that you would like to share with the listeners?
I think, number one, take care of yourself. Number two, take your time. So, there's definitely pleasure in living off the cuff and doing things spontaneously, but I find if you slow down just a little bit to think things through, even just a little bit, you can come up with dramatically different results. I've been hasty in a lot of things, and I guess this sounds like old man talking, because maybe it is, but there's always the old people telling young people to slow down, but it's true. Like, it's fun to go fast and it's fun to make quick decisions, but when you think things through a little bit, you make fewer mistakes, and you generally get better results.
Well said. I think that's something we should start thinking about as well. Maybe take each day a little bit slower.
I don't know about the days, just the topics, the things in between the day. Days go fast, no matter how you look at it.
That is very true. We've learned that.
Decisions don't have to be fast.
All right. Well, where can everybody find you and your businesses? Drop some links to your socials. Where can they find you?
Well, the bar is elixirsf.com, and Elixir is spelled with an I. It's ELIXIRSF. I don't know why a lot of people misspell Elixir with an E. It is not a word in any language. So elixirsf.com is the website. At elixirsf is the Instagram and Twitter. Elixir Saloon on Facebook. Fresh Victor is Fresh Victor Cocktails on Instagram, and Fresh Victor Mix on Twitter, because Fresh Victor Cocktails is too long for Twitter. Fresh Victor Cocktails on Facebook. All of these are on LinkedIn as well. Elixir to Go is at Elixir to Go. Elixir to Go LLC on Facebook. Cocktail Ambassadors at Cocktail Ambassadors. All of those are at. You can find them all. I've got something on every social media channel, and well, not every, but Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn are the four I focus on. So whether you're a company looking for consulting or an education program or that, or you want to put Fresh Victor in your bar, make your cocktail program profitable. It's great for to go programs, batching cocktails quick and easy out the door with few touch points, very healthy and sanitary, or our smaller packaging for to-go programs for cocktail kits. Fresh Victor and Elixir are my two main focuses now. And when we get out of this, I hope I can get back to doing some consulting work, and I hope our business grows on the cocktail. You guys are in the Midwest, and that cocktail class business for team builders and stuff, that's kind of anywhere, locationless. So elixirtogo.com, TOGO. You can just plan an event form on there. You can contact me through there. And if you just Google H. Joseph Ehrmann, EHRMANN, you'll find 10 plus pages of results and videos of my cocktail videos and my recipes and photos and all kinds of stuff. I'm not very private. I'm very accessible, and I'm very out there.
Thank you so much, H. It's been a pleasure, and this has been a great recording. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, we had a great time hearing about your stories and everything.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. It's nice to meet you, and pleasure to be here.
All right, After Hours Nation, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you'd like to stay updated, you can check out our site at AfterHoursCast.com. Don't forget to tune in next Tuesday morning for our next episode. After Hours Nation, stay thirsty, my friends.